안내 말씀드리겠습니다. 2022 K.E.Y 플랫폼 총회가 잠시 후 시작될 예정입니다. 참가자분들께서는 모두 입장해 주시기 바랍니다. 원활한 세션 진행을 위해 가지고 계신 휴대폰의 전원을 잠시 꺼주시기 바랍니다. 2022 K.E.Y 플랫폼에서는 동시 통역을 제공하고 있습니다. 한국어는 채널 1번, 영어는 채널 2번이오니 통역기 이용해 참고하시기 바랍니다. 본 행사는 안전한 행사 진행을 위해 감염병 예방 수칙을 안내해드리고 있습니다. 모든 참석자 여러분께서는 행사장 입장 시 명찰과 마스크를 반드시 착용하여 주시길 부탁드립니다.
(2022) K.E.Y 플랫폼 총회가 곧 시작될 예정입니다. 로비에 계신 참가자분들께서는 모두 착석하여 입장하여 주시기 바랍니다. 감사합니다.
일주간의 준비 기간을 거쳐 4월 25일부터 해제됩니다. 이란 해제는
코로나19 사태 장기화로 소상공인의 영업 손실이 눈덩이처럼 커지면서
그런데 광주에서는 코로나에 감염돼 재택 치료를 받았던 10대 고등학생이 숨졌습니다. 백신을 2차까지 맞았고
혁신에 집중하고 변화를 추구하는지 그걸 찾아내서 그것을 모아서 우리 기업인들에게 보여주고 싶었습니다.
나라의 리더가 되기 위해서 필요한 게 어떤 건지
That was a great summary of 2022 with a clear message. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew Robel. I have come from London, from England. I am the founding partner of Emerging Europe, a growth hub that provides analysis and intelligence specific to Central and Eastern Europe. I am very happy and honored to be with you here today at MoneyToday's global conference, K.E.Y Platform. My ties with the K.E.Y Platform conference go back to 2020. At that time, the COVID-19 pandemic was so severe that I could only participate online. But today, in 2022, I am here in Korea, and I am really delighted to be here with you in person. Being here in person is particularly rewarding and quite emotional, actually, after those 2 years of the pandemic. The last 2 years have been tough for all of us, and I am grateful that we have gone through it together. Now, the K.E.Y Platform Conference was launched in 2013, and it was hosted by Michael Tram, the head of the advisory board at Drugge Group, a European company, and himself a European. He had served as the master of ceremonies on this stage until 2019, before the pandemic broke out. I have been given the privilege of serving as the new Master of Ceremonies this year. This is particularly meaningful as in 2022 we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the K.E.Y Platform Conference. This year we will proceed with the K.E.Y Platform Conference based on Metaverse. I hope all the participants in Metaverse can also enjoy the K.E.Y Platform 22 conference together with us. This year especially, because the Russian invasion in Ukraine, where actually I was supposed to be at the end of February, is a huge global issue. Now, the K.E.Y Platform will shortly present you some future scenarios covering geopolitical risks, including the war in Ukraine, and I will try my best to help you understand the situation better. The K.E.Y Platform 2022 conference kicked off yesterday with a pre-conference event and is scheduled to run through tomorrow. The opening plenary will include a talk between world-renowned scholar Edwin Filner, who is here with us. He is also the founder of the Heritage Foundation, as well as Mr. Tae Shin-kwon, Vice Chairman and CEO of the Federation of Korean Industries, who is one of the leaders spearheading Korea's miraculous economic growth and social development. They will share their outlooks on how some of those complex geopolitical changes, including risks posed by the Ukraine war, will transform the fundamental international order. Over the months, Money Today has conducted a survey with about 500 people from academia, research and investment institutions, and among business leaders in the United States, China, Japan, and Europe to study the global risks that are highly likely to occur in 5 areas: geopolitical, economic, social, technological, and environmental over the next 3 to 5 years, and will have a global impact if they occur. The results will be presented in detail following the talk between Mr. Fulner and Mr. Kwong. The opening plenary will be concluded with a session where global experts will discuss the challenges we need to resolve and the opportunities we need to identify in the face of these complex risks. Before we begin, I would like to invite Mr. Jung-Myung Park, who is the CEO of Money Today, to the stage to deliver a welcome address. Please welcome him with a round of applause.
안녕하십니까, 박종면입니다. 키 플랫폼을 찾아주신 여러분 환영합니다. 유튜브와 메타버스 중계로 함께 해주시는 여러분들께도 감사의 말씀을 전합니다. 올해로 저희 머니투데이 글로벌 컨퍼런스 키 플랫폼이 10주년을 맞았습니다. 키 플랫폼은 대한민국의 진지하고 열정적인 학습의 장이 될 수 있도록 지난 10년 동안 한결같이 노력해 왔습니다. 국내에는 좀처럼 알려지지 않은 전 세계 곳곳의 보석 같은 기업들을 발굴해 소개해 드렸습니다. 불확실성에 덮인 시대에 밝은 빛과 같은 인사이트를 전해주는 석학들을 직접 모셔 지혜로운 이야기를 들어왔습니다. 정책 리더, 연구자, 전문가들을 직접 찾아 만나 대한민국을 알리고 세계를 배웠습니다. 키 플랫폼은 특히 한국 경제가 혁신하고 성장하기 위해 필요한 지혜를 전하려고 애썼습니다. 언론사로서 기자들이 가장 잘하는 것이 취재입니다. 땀내나게 발로 뛰었습니다. 해마다 특별 취재팀을 구성해 최소 100명 이상의 글로벌 기업 CEO와 연구기관 전문가들을 반드시 만났습니다. 머니투데이의 취재 역량을 갈아 넣어 만든 지식을 여러분 앞에 선보여 드렸습니다. 키 플랫폼은 10년 동안 3차례의 정부를 경험했습니다. 당대 정부가 국정과제를 개발하고 추진하는 데 도움을 주고자 경제, 산업, 사회 등의 거시적인 환경 분석과 미래 예측 연구 성과를 공유했습니다. 올해는 러시아, 우크라이나 전쟁부터 불안한 엔데믹까지 리스크가 산재해 있습니다. 세계화가 낡은 개념이 되는 것 같지만은 디지털 경제의 세계화, 동기화는 훨씬 과속화하는 반면 정세 급변에 따라 국제 질서는 오히려 블록화되고 있고 과거의 촘촘했던 글로벌 사설망은 깨져가고 있습니다. 원래 키 플랫폼은 이처럼 리스크들이 복합화된 환경에 대응할 수 있는 방안들을 연구했습니다. 워낙 급격하게 바뀌어가는 현상 변화를 쫓느라 다소 깊이가 모자랄 수도 있지만 중대한 리스크의 본질과 변화 가능성을 염두에 두고 경각심을 갖는 것만으로도 대비의 첫발을 떼는 셈이라고 저희는 생각합니다. 특히 새롭게 출발하는 정부가 이처럼 어려운 환경을 이겨내고 대한민국호를 안전하게 운항할 수 있어야 합니다. 내부의 지난한 대립을 끝내고 국론을 통합해 외부로부터 닥쳐올 위기에 철저히 대비해야 합니다. 어제 사전 행사부터 시작한 2022 키 플랫폼, 올해 10주년을 맞아 더욱 내실 있게 준비한 만큼 내일까지 이루어질 좋은 강연과 토론들을 경청해 주시기를 바랍니다. 대단히 고맙습니다.
Thank you, Mr. Park. I am more than certain that the audience is looking forward to this year's anniversary edition of the K.E.Y Platform Conference as much as I am. Now, I would like to invite the founder of the Heritage Foundation, Mr. Edwin Fulner, the vice chairman and CEO, of the Korean. That's exactly what it is, Mr. Tae Shin-kwang. And they will be joined by Anthony Kim, research manager at the Heritage Foundation. For the talk, you will watch a brief introduction before they start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. My name is Anthony Kim. I'm very delighted back in Korea this time. We had to go through like online version of this K.E.Y platform. But along with Dr. Fulner and Vice Chairman Kwon, I also congratulate K.E.Y platform, MoneyToday's K.E.Y platform, this 10th anniversary edition. I think we have a lot to talk about or unpack because this is really about what's ahead of us. What should we do? So without wasting any time, obviously I don't have to introduce Dr. Fulner and Vice Chairman Kwon, so I gently skip that part, and I'll just dive into the discussion. This discussion will be about 40 to 45 minutes. So gentlemen, let's take a sort of step back. Back in 2017, all of us, 3 of us, were in Seoul, Korea. There was a different time. There was BC, before COVID. And we had an interesting news coming out of the big screen in front of us during one of the dinner session. We were actually in Seoul back in May 2017 to do a special meeting for Mongpalaran Society in Seoul, South Korea. Coincidentally, that was the election night. And then I saw Mr. Kwon's face. He wasn't super happy. I don't know why. But he wasn't. And then Dr. Fulner was watching the election outcome. Here's my question, Dr. Fulner. You and I, we've been talking about this. When you look at South Korea, it's been always the land of morning calm. But it becomes the land of afternoon chaos sometimes.
Sometimes.
When you look back this 5 years, you know how dynamic South Korea, free market democracy. How would you assess South Korea? The latest election, where are we, Dr. Fulner?
Yes. One of the cardinal rules that I believe in is that any democratic system, the United States, Korea, Japan, only has one president at a time. The time of the Moon presidency is almost over, and some of us are, shall we say, eagerly anticipating the new era that will begin on May 10th. I had the great honor yesterday of spending some time with President-elect Yoon, whom I've known for several years, and hearing him affirm to me in specific detail his commitment to the market system, to free enterprise, to opportunities for both existing Korean global leaders, the chaebol, but also for emerging small and medium enterprises, and particularly for releasing that entrepreneurial spirit that has always so impressed me on my many, many visits to Korea over more than half a century. It's an exciting time to be looking at our bilateral relationship. I noted to the President-elect that not only is Joe Biden's very first trip to Asia about to happen shortly after he is inaugurated, but the very first stop on that first trip to Asia by President Joe Biden is going to be in Seoul. And I think that symbolically reaffirms the key relationship between the United States and the Republic of Korea. And that key relationship is not simply military and security, it's also very much economic. The Chorus FTA that had to be renegotiated under the Trump administration, but that ties our economies together so well. The common challenges we face from the North, and obviously the ongoing kind of tightrope that the ROK government has to walk between its strategic partner, the United States, and its largest trading partner, the People's Republic of China. So it's an exciting time to be back in Korea, to look forward and to say, hey, things are looking good. And my dear friend Kwon Tae-shin is, I think we'll be able to do a lot more together in the months and years ahead.
Not surprisingly, Dr. Fulner, you set the tone and stage in an optimistic, forward-looking tone. I think that's what we need. But Vice Chairman Kwon, as the head of an important organization called Federation of Korean Industries, I'm sure you have a slightly different perspective when you look at the past 5 years. It was an easy time because of COVID and many other issues. But you're also a very respected policymaker and technocrat. When you look back South Korea over the past 5 years, what could have been different? And how can we make South Korea a lot more dynamic? As Dr. Fulner alluded, how can we move forward from this point on? This is a new chapter.
Thank you very much. Thank you. But first of all, I must not forget to mention about Dr. Edwin Fuller, who is my old friend for a long time. And then I respect him a lot, and it's a great honor and privilege to have talks with you here. And then I think some of you may not know the Dr. Fuller started the Heritage Foundation in 1973 and has been president, important, most renowned and influential think tank in the world and in the USA, has for 36 years. And we also member of Mount Pelerin Society, started in 1943, I guess, to fight against communism, socialism, fascism, and even too much government interventionist. So in that sense, this is my great honor to have talks with you. And all things come to my mind after 5 years. The reason Korea could have miracle from the poorest country in the world, now 10th largest economy, it's all coming from free democracy and market economy. And then this President Moon government went against the market economy and free democracy. So looking back, they started with a good intention, more chances to poor people, and then more money for workers. And they suddenly increased minimum wage without exception. Within 2 years, almost more than 30%. As a result, many small and medium companies, mom and pop shops, and restaurants, they cannot afford to pay such a high salary. So they fired many of them. And then, as a result, many youths unemployed. And to make things better, statistically, they spent a lot of government money, huge government deficit, more than 400 trillion won. So government debt to GDP went up from 33% to more than 50% now, and creating a lot of the part-time jobs. As a result, the jobs for young people, 30s and 40s, and manufacturing industry went down, about 500,000 jobs gone, whilst they created 1.5 million jobs for aged people, part-time jobs, working less than 15, 20 hours a week, and then spread money. And then statistically, employment went up, but in reality, the jobs are gone. And because they were so much regulatory, a lot of new regulations, doing business as a CEO in Korea, very difficult. There are more than 2,200 clauses which can put CEOs into jail. And this Moon government made more and more the regulations against private businesses, against the CEOs. As a result, many companies, including small and medium companies, decided not to do business here. So during last 5 years, roughly, arrival basis, more than $300 billion went abroad, whilst because of too much strict regulation and then very militant labor unions, therefore less and less foreign companies come to Korea. Adding all them together, maybe at least maximum $75 billion last 5 years, whilst $300 billion went abroad. Then you can guess how many jobs we lost. So as they try to do things with ideology, without knowing market economy, to protect and help poor people, but as a result, they created more poor people, especially they took the jobs away from newly college graduate. So, and they were against big corporations, against the market. So we had a very hard time, but now I'm very happy. We see the president-elect who strongly believes in market economy and private businesses. So I hope things will become better soon.
Thank you, Mr. Gon. I think that these two gentlemen on the stage, they agree we are definitely on a new chapter for South Korea. Now, obviously, we are not here to talk about what happened. I think if I may summarize Vice Chairman Gon's comment, things could have been different, and things should be different from now on. I think that's his message. Now, looking into the future, because that matters to us, and I think that's why I see CEO of MoneyToday, Mr. Park, and the managing director of Drake Huang, when they put together this K.E.Y platform, they want to make this K.E.Y platform as the launching pad for the next activities and innovative ideas rather than ideologies. On that note, if you look at the world, today's Korea, so politically, the new administration, new chapter, but global environment is very different. The COVID, the China is not as strong as before in terms of economics and political sense, and then we have Putin, and very, very complicated. Since February 24, the world has changed. In this context, Dr. Fulner, one of the maxims you've been teaching me over the years, 3 I's, ideas, individuals, and institutions. These 3 I's matter more than ever. And then you had a wonderful meeting yesterday with the president-elect. How could you put these 3 I's into the new administration that Korea will welcome?
Well, thank you, Anthony, for mentioning the 3 I's. Ideas, very fundamental to left governments like the Moon government, and to more market-oriented right-of-center governments like the incoming Yoon administration. The individuals, obviously the president's at the top, but one of Fulner's other absolute requirements is that people are policy. And I had the honor of working all the way back to President Nixon in his first administration in the Department of Defense in Washington in the Vietnam era, through Reagan, Ford, and on down through Trump, where I worked with him in terms of the transition. And one of the things that I always emphasized is, Mr. President or Mr. Leader in the U.S. Senate or Mr. Speaker in the House of Representatives, people are policy. Make sure you surround yourself with right-thinking individuals who agree with your fundamental principles, who, yes, have technical competence, but who also are fundamentally in favor of moving the agenda forward that you were elected to promote and to advocate. So I'm encouraged by some of the early announcements of the new administration that's being formed here in Korea right now. And I'm also, frankly, encouraged. You all know what the political situation is in the United States. As we look ahead, President Biden, whom I knew and worked with 20-some years ago when he was senator, when he was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I think when what I believe will happen this fall, when the Republicans will retake both the House of Representatives and the Senate. Frankly, I'm optimistic not only about that change in the Congress, but I think maybe, just maybe, it will enable Joe Biden, the Joe Biden who was elected in 2020 as a moderate mainstream Democrat, but who basically came in and was captured by a cadre of really hard leftist ideologues in terms of the policies he's been following and the failures that have surrounded him, that there's an opportunity for the United States in the relatively short order, not just looking forward to the election of 2024, to kind of get back on track in terms of moving forward as the real leader of our friends and allies around the world, and also back on track in terms of the free economy in the United States. Conservatives always like that, but in the past, mainstream liberal Democrats in the U.S. context have also advocated for it. Today it's gone because of some of those ideas from the left inside the United States. And so the institutions that are there to build for the future, I think, are going to have a new wave of opportunity come immediately following these elections that we will have this fall. And I hope that that's going to be true in terms of the people that the new president is appointing. And then you have municipal elections, I believe, shortly thereafter. That, again, I think will be a signal to the people of Korea that the era of big government, of micromanaging from the top down, is not the way to go. That doesn't promote freedom. It doesn't promote opportunity. And that's what we should be involved with.
On these notes, 3 I's, once again, ideas, individuals, and institutions. Vice Chairman Kwon, in a way, your organization, Federation of Korean Industries, is really about advancing these 3 I's, ideas, individuals, institutions, under the rule of law. I mean, look at the Korean economy. Companies like Hanwha, Samsung, Hyundai, they all had these I's, ideas, individuals, and institutions. If you have an opportunity to advise a new administration for South Korea, what would be your one-line recommendation, especially in this very complicated world? Not only this is an economic policy recommendation, but I think this is time to elevate that economic policy into practical foreign policy. In that setting, do you have any recommendation?
I have many things to say, but first of all, before forgetting, this is famous book, The Road to Serfdom, written by Friedrich Hayek. And this was million book seller and special abridged edition and forwarded by Honorable Edwin Dr. Fuller. So this book telling us that if you ask a government to take care of all, like education, hospital, houses, and then if somebody promise you government can take care everything for you, and then they can achieve equity, not prosperity, not growth, but you will be deceived. Every communist country, socialist country say the same things, but at the end of the day, that country do not have any equity at all. So we should depend upon free market economy, free democracy. That's the showcases Korea comparing with North Korea. So in that sense, this book is very important. And because the especially economic policy, you should not handle it with your ideology. That's the great mistake of this leading elite of this Moon government. Top people, top elites, they all from student demonstrators, and they had a very narrow view. Yeah. The weakest of them, they never worked for a company, they never paid salary to anybody. They never studied abroad, worked abroad. So they are lacking the importance, knowing the importance of the private businesses and then international, the arena issues. So in that sense, we are happy. We did a survey of K.E.Y recently, a sample survey with 1,000 people, they said the top priority partner country is USA, 86.8%, while China is 3.2%. And the national favorability out of 10, USA 7.0, whilst that of China 3.2. So all Korean people know the importance of our relationship with USA in this changing global environment. And but you know, Korea, we sell a lot to China. About 25% of our export goes to China. So economically, China is a very important country. But we have North Korea supported by China, which has huge missiles and also nuclear. So I asked the Honorable former Prime Minister of Singapore, Ko Chok-tong, same as Singapore, Korea, would you please give me advice how we can balance? He said they had a similar experience with China because they had a kind of large-scale military training, the exercise in Taiwan that made China angry, and then they gave a lot of hard time. But Ko Chok-tong's answer, if you show you are consistent, stubborn policy direction, it's life or death issue. So even if you say anything, we cannot give up. But on the other hand, if economically, trade issues, you are very important, China cannot look down upon you. In that sense, our strong relationship with USA is very important. With strong alliance, then China cannot look down upon us. Because to protect Korea against North Korean missiles, we let THAAD system. The site was not good, so we asked Lotte to sell their golf club to government. And then they tried to make a THAAD site there. But China gave us Lotte a very, very hard time, which is completely against the WTO, where China is member. At last, Lotte gave up all the department and then big market places. And even these days, China regulated the group tour to Korea, regulated the Korean art shows there in China. So, which is against the international norm. So, the main reason these leftists in Korea, South Korea, and North Korea and China, their aim is to kick out U.S. away from Korean Peninsula. Then they can handle it. So that's the reason why they agitate anti-America, anti-Japan sentiment. And this government, Moon government, did a lot of things. They gave up defense system by September 19th agreement, completely giving everything to North Korea. But during last 5 years, North Korea developed a nuclear and missiles, more accurate one, more powerful one. And then when Mr. Moon visited China, the official visit, he stayed there for 4 or 5 days. Among 11 meals, only 2 meals were official ones, 9 meals alone. And then even though he visited China from 1992, when we first made a diplomatic relationship with China, every Chinese leader returned our visit, our president's visit. But Mr. Xi didn't come here. And then even North Korea, Kim, made fool of him. So, because now we are going back to this situation, and then this is kind of a struggle between democratic countries and authoritarian, totalitarian countries. So Korea should find the right place.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Guan. I think you highlighted a very important aspect, actually a very important timely reminder, the importance of U.S.-Korea relationship. I mean, U.S.-Korea relationship is really military, economic, and everything. But we got to think about what should be the next level of our engagement. And on that, I want to invite back Dr. Fulner to this discussion because, we have this China equation and then other challenges. But if you look at U.S.-Korea relationship, you've been through this evolving dynamic relationship, and you always think that things can be better. So how should we advance U.S.-Korea, let's say, partnership? Because that's the key word you used in your meeting with the president-elect yesterday. We can still talk about the conventional frame, but we can elevate U.S.-Korea partnership into a new horizon.
Yes.
And what would be that new horizon? I'm looking at, for example, Europe. There are countries like-minded, willing in Central and Eastern European countries. What can we do?
Yes, yes. Thank you, Anthony. The point you make is first has to be based on the idea that both the ROK and the USA has to clean up our own act internally. Some of the problems that we face internally, frankly, had to do with COVID. You mentioned what the Moon administration did in terms of redefining employment, in terms of minimum wage, et cetera. In the United States, under the kind of the excuse of COVID, restrictions on receipt of food stamps were eliminated. There were no income test on food stamps. What happened? The number of food stamp recipients in the United States more than doubled. Welfare reform. There used to be a requirement that if you were on welfare, you should be out seeking a job or in job training programs. All of that was waived under COVID. And so now we have a president who, frankly, talks about the wonderful level of employment. Well, one of the reasons that there's such a high level of employment and such low unemployment statistics in the United States is that millions of people have just dropped out of the workforce because it's easier to sit back and get a government check. Well, that's something that we really have to clean up inside the United States so that we too can move forward on these issues. And as your president-elect reminded me yesterday, he's going to face a major challenge in your National Assembly, which is going to continue to be controlled by the opposition. But there are things that can be done by executive orders, by administrative decisions, and by good, sensible people around him. Again, people are policy. So first, clean up our own houses. Then secondly, let's look for those areas of opportunity. I had the great honor of visiting Romania twice over the last several months. And the last time I landed in Bucharest, as my Romanian friends who are here will remember, was on February 24th. Literally, as I landed at the Bucharest airport, the Russians were marching into Ukraine. That was not good symbolism, I didn't think. But today we have the first land war in Europe in 70 years that's upsetting everything around the world, but that at the same time does give us new opportunities. It's an opportunity, for example, where our allies, particularly in Central Europe, those members of NATO, like Romania, Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, Slovakia, the Baltics, are all, frankly, reminded of the threat that Russia poses to them. And that means a reinvigoration of shared defense responsibilities. That means let's look at defense suppliers. Korea has magnificent companies that have long been involved in this area, and Korea ought to be looking at that in terms of Central Europe. There are opportunities in terms of nuclear power. Had the opportunity to meet with the Romanian energy minister not long ago, and telling me about what they're doing in nuclear power. And again, Korea has good technology and good opportunities to promote that sort of thing. So as you, with the new administration here, look forward, I'm reminded of what one of my old mentors used to say about Europe. He said, France and the UK, where we both studied, France and the UK and Germany, that's old Europe. New Europe is Central Europe, and the new Europe is invigorating, it's entrepreneurial, and there are so many good opportunities there where both the United States and Korea ought to be able to work together. And that's why I'm so pleased, too, that here at the Money Today K.E.Y platform, that there is going to be a program later today talking about some of those opportunities with our Romanian friends. It's an exciting time to be involved in all these things, but as you know, Anthony, I'm always an optimist.
So that's why I want to ask Vice Chairman Guan, how would you grade Dr. Fulner's optimism? Is it realistic, or is he just talking about it?
Okay. But first of all, I would like to mention about Ukraine issues.
Yeah.
The unprovoked, unprecedented, the one-sided unilateral invasion, full forces by Mr. Putin. The only thing he is saying is to defend his own country, but doesn't make sense. He ignores independence and sovereignty of other small countries. And secondly, he wants to revive the glory of USSR. But as a Korean, we must not forget, because of sudden the joining of Pacific War by USSR, the 9th of August 1945, the day when the atomic bomb dropped in Nagasaki. So that's just 1 week before the war ended. USSR joined the Pacific War, and they want to spread communism everywhere like Eastern Europe. They want to spread it to Korean Peninsula. So because of Chinese invasion, coming into North Korea, Korea was divided up to now. So our division was partly made by USSR. And secondly, he gave a lot of weapons, hard weapons, big weapons, tanks, artillery, airplanes to Kim Il-sung. And he let North Korea started the Korean War, killing many million people. But with the help of United Nations, USA, Korea now made a big miracle. It's all coming from free democracy and then the market economy. So in that sense, we should help Ukraine better than any other countries. But it is a shame. In our National Assembly, they are too much domestic, local oriented. They think about domestic politics. They don't know anything about international issues. Among 300 members of parliament, only 50 joined the discussion with Mr. Zelensky, not in their big podium, main hall, but in small library. So it's a shame. So for Korea to change ourselves against this changing environment, the strengths of the totalitarian countries, Russia, China, then we should help Eastern European countries, Romania. We can show them the good example of the free democracy and market economy as a success of Korean miracles. And secondly, to reduce the influence of China, to reduce our shares, we should diversify our export and investment market. And also, the key cornerstone or linchpin of Korean Peninsula's peace and prosperity was mutual defense agreement with USA, which prevents North Korea's invasion again into Korea. Because Ukraine did not have that kind of mutual defense agreement with any strong country, because it was not a member of NATO, it was invaded by Russia. So in that sense, we should have a strong alliance with USA and then have the better relationship with Eastern European countries. In addition to that, we should help each other, cooperate each other, same-minded people. Our philosophy as member of OECD, free democracy and then market economy, those are shared by Japan, Australia, Canada, Singapore. So Korea should be member of Quad. And then the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework.
Excellent comments, Vice Chairman Kwon. Obviously, we need more time to talk about all these key front lines. And I think that this will require another session, but we have following sessions where we're going to talk about these important dimensions. But if I may, Dr. Fulner and Vice Chairman Kwan, you have known each other for more than 20 years.
20 years.
To say the least. You had a lot more hair. You were much younger back then. A few more soju together, maybe. But it seems to me it's very clear more than ever, because we are getting into the final 2 minutes of this session. I just want to say, I think what you are saying, Dr. Fulner and Vice Chairman Kwan, for our audience and the future, the incoming administration of Korea, the strategic ambiguity is over. I think this is time to move onward and upward with a strategic clarity. So with that note, if you want to have one sentence or two, if you want to conclude our session together, more than welcome. Otherwise, as you always say, onward from this point on.
Onward. You're absolutely right, though, Anthony, that strategic ambiguity doesn't work. If we're talking about strategy and a strategic objective, whether it's at the national level, whether it's at the individual corporate level, it can't be ambiguous. It has to be clear, it has to be focused, and we have to be jointly driven toward achieving those objectives. And so strategic clarity and working together, I think, is the way forward.
Yeah,
Tae-shin?
I agree with you. We must not forget the miracle of Korean economy and politics came from free democracy and market economy and strong alliance with USA. But these days, the global economy, global politics is very unclear. And then I think because of the COVID-19, because of US-China issues, the supply chain collapsed a lot. And because Russia invaded Ukraine, oil prices, gas prices, energy prices went up. Not only energy prices, but also grain. And as Dr. Fulner mentioned, many governments, especially Korea and including USA, they spent a lot of money. Huge demand pull pressure, inflationary pressure. And also we have a cost push pressure. But the Korea's strength is trade, but we cannot take advantage of free trade atmosphere less than before. Therefore, we should be more focused to help close ties with USA and then join other like-minded countries.
Excellent.
Hear, hear.
Gentlemen, we really feel, we meaning entire audience in this room and beyond, your renewed optimism as well as a revitalized determination to work together. On that note, we're going to conclude this session. Ladies and gentlemen, Vice Chairman Kwan and Dr. Fulner.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, excellent.
Tae-shin, wonderful to be with you always. Thank you.
Anthony, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Everything can change in an instant, whether or not you're ready.
This wasn't the world I wanted, but it was the one I found myself in. This time I'm ready. Because I know war.
War never changes.
Сколько еще можно это терпеть? Россия сделала все для сохранения территориальной целостности Украины.
러시아 대통령이 우크라이나 동부 돈바스 지역에서 군사 작전.
푸틴 대통령은 더 이상 우크라이나로부터의 위협에 인내 또 러시아의 결정적인 행동이 필요한 상황입니다.
your shelves empty. There's no meat, no toilet paper. It's crazy. High demand for groceries combined with
오로지 국민만 바라보고 국민만 제대로 모시는 그런 사람이 되겠습니다, 여러분.
Administration blocked the development of the Keystone XL pipeline, a decision reversed by the Trump administration.
중국 경제가 32년 만에 가장 낮은 성장률을 보일 거라는 전망입니다. 부동산 기업들이 우리나라를 넘어 전 세계적으로 거세지고 있다는 의미인데 이로 인해 경기 침체를 동반한 스태그플레이션 우려도 확산되고 있습니다. IMF 국제 통화기금은 최근
완전 상당.
대기하며 군사적 도발 승리를 끌어올리고 있습니다. 이에 따라 핵실험 재개가
안녕하세요. 지구본 연구소의 최준영입니다. 유튜브의 지구본 연구소나 3프로TV 채널을 통해 저를 아시는 분도 계실 테고 오늘 이 자리에서 처음 보신 분도 계실 테지만 지구본 연구소라는 이름만으로 제가 어떤 일을 하는지 대략적으로 짐작하실 수 있을 것 같습니다. 저는 그동안 수많은 지정학적 이슈들을 분석하고 연구하면서 그 배경과 전망 등을 다뤄왔습니다. 하지만 최근처럼 정신없이 바빴던 적도 없었던 것 같습니다. 러시아의 우크라이나 침공으로 정말 많이 생각하고 할 일들이 정말 많아졌습니다. 지난 2월 러시아의 대대적인 침공으로 시작된 러시아 우크라이나 전쟁은 당초 압도적인 군사력 차이로 인해서 수일 내로 끝날 것이라고 다들 전망했었죠. 근데 그것과 달리 우크라이나의 반격과 그리고 러시아 북부 전선의 후퇴 등 예상을 벗어난 전황이 전개되고 있습니다. 많은 전망과 분석이 있었지만 현재로서는 우크라이나 동부 지역을 중심으로 한 러시아와 우크라이나의 대규모 충돌 그 결과가 앞으로 많은 것을 결정할 것 같습니다. 여기에서 어떤 결과가 나오느냐에 따라서 이후 많은 것이 변화하고 결정될 것 같다라고 생각을 합니다. 만약에 우크라이나가 러시아의 시도를 좌절시킬 경우에 휴전 또는 종전 협상이 진행될 것 같습니다. 이 경우 러시아는 당초 의도했던 우크라이나의 나토 가입 철회, 그리고 중립국화, 그리고 도네츠크와 루안스크 공화국의 분리 독립, 그리고 이미 확보해놨던 크림반도에 대한 러시아의 영유권 확보도 얻지 못할 가능성이 있습니다. 반면 러시아군이 우크라이나의 가장 핵심적인 군사 전력을 괴멸시키고 동부 지역을 장악한다면 러시아는 우크라이나에 대해 동부 지역의 포기 및 그리고 비무장 중립을 조건으로 휴전 협상에 나설 수도 있습니다. 하지만 이 경우 우크라이나는 극히 취약한 상황에 내몰리게 되면서 오래지 않아 다시 한번 러시아로 인한 위협에 노출될 가능성이 높다고 할 수 있겠습니다. 러시아 우크라이나 전쟁이 종결되면 전후 국제 질서는 서구 자유민주주의 진영대 권위주의 국가 연대의 대립 구도가 더욱 가속화될 것으로 전망됩니다. 나아가 세계 질서를 두고 서로 갈등과 대립을 반복하는 가운데 신냉전 체제를 형성할 가능성도 점점 높아지고 있습니다. 자유민주주의 가치를 추구하는 미국을 중심으로 하는 유럽의 나토 동맹국들, 그리고 아시아, 태평양 동맹국들의 가치 동맹 결집력이 이전보다 강화될 가능성은 더욱 높기 때문입니다. 특히 이전까지 브렉시트를 비롯한 여러 가지 사태 등으로 분열과 갈등 양상을 빚어왔던 EU 국가들은 안보 의식이 그리고 위기 의식이 고조되면서 하나로 뭉칠 수 있는 토대가 마련되고 있습니다. 현재 미국 안보 전략의 중심이 인도 태평양 지역으로 집결된 상태임을 고려해 볼 때 러시아의 위협에 대항하는 EU 국가들의 결집과 군비 증강은 필연적인 상황으로 보입니다. 군비 확장에 그동안 소극적인 모습을 보여왔던 독일은 올해 국방비로 특별 예산 1,000억 유로를 편성을 하였습니다. 하나로 약 134조 원에 이르는 어마어마한 특별 기금을 조성하고 매년 GDP의 2% 이상을 국방비에 투자하겠다고 밝혔습니다. 또한 그동안 나토 가입을 꺼려왔던 피해왔던 핀란드와 스웨덴 같은 국가들은 이번 전쟁을 통해 기존의 입장을 뒤집고 전면적으로 전격적으로 나토 가입을 추진할 가능성이 점점 높아지고 있습니다. 또한 러시아의 안보 위협에 대항해 발트 3국 그리고 폴란드를 비롯한 동유럽 국가들의 군비 확대와 더불어서 친서방 움직임은 과거보다 더욱 가속화될 것으로 보입니다. 하지만 군비 확충과 러시아로부터 에너지 독립은 많은 비용을 요구하고 있습니다. 그리고 이를 둘러싼 많은 갈등과 혼란 역시 발생할 가능성이 점점 높아지고 있습니다. 러시아와 중국으로 대표되는 권위주의 국가들의 연대와 협력 역시 다른 측면에서 강화될 것으로 전망되고 있습니다. 중국은 러시아에 대한 경제 제재에 반대하는 동시에 이미 우크라이나 침공 이전에 러시아산 천연가스 대량 구매 계약을 체결함으로써 서방의 제재 속에서 러시아의 버팀목이 되어주고 있습니다. 분명한 것은 이번 전쟁을 계기로 서방 세계와 그리고 제재를 받는 러시아 그리고 미국으로부터 강한 견제와 압박을 받고 있는 중국 양국 사이의 협력과 공조는 과거 어느 때보다도 강화될 수밖에 없다는 점은 명백해 보입니다. 하지만 과거의 역사에서 우리가 알 수 있듯이 러시아와 중국 두 나라의 관계는 언제나 갈등을 내포하고 있었으며 궁극적인 신뢰관계에 이르지는 못할 것 같다라는 예상 역시 명백할 것 같습니다. 여기에 더해서 인도, 터키, 브라질, 멕시코 등의 국가들도 자국의 이익을 위해 다양한 판단 그리고 협력 관계를 구축할 가능성도 점점 높아지고 있습니다. 무엇보다도 인도는 독자적인 영역을 확대하려고 노력하고 있습니다. 중국과는 명백하게 대립 관계이지만 그렇다고 해서 미국을 중심으로 한 세력권에 일방적으로 편입되는 것도 원하지 않는 게 인도의 입장입니다. 중국을 견제하기 위해 미국이 주도하는 안보 협의체인 쿼드에 가입한 회원국이기도 하지만 필요에 따라서는 언제든지 중국과의 관계 개선에 나설 수도 있는 것이 인도의 입장입니다. 또한 러시아와의 전통적인 협력 관계 역시 무시할 수 없다는 점 명심해야 될 것입니다. 인도를 지나치게 단순한 시각으로 바라보는 우를 범해서는 안 될 것입니다. 사우디아라비아 역시 전통적인 친미 국가죠. 하지만 미국과의 관계가 소원해진 가운데 최근에 원유 거래의 위안화 결제를 검토하는 등 중국과의 협력 관계를 강화하는 움직임을 보이고 있죠. 미국은 그동안 중국에서 발을 빼고 거리를 두고 싶어 했습니다. 하지만 정말로 그렇게 될 수 있을지에 대해서는 다시 의문이 제기가 되고 있죠. 전통적인 동맹 관계가 유지될 수 있을 것인지에 대해서는 좀 더 지켜봐야 되겠지만 그렇다고 해서 과거로 돌아가지는 않을 것 같습니다. 여기에 더해 이란, 북한 등 핵 개발 이슈로 미국과 대립하고 있는 여러 국가들은 독자적인 판단으로 다시 한번 지정학적 위기를 고조시킬 수 있는 가능성 역시 배제할 수 없을 것 같습니다. 특히 중국으로서는 이 러시아, 우크라이나 전쟁을 바라보는 시각은 상당히 양면적일 수 있습니다. 그동안 미국으로 받던 압박과 견제를 많이 겪어왔죠. 하지만 이런 중국은 러시아가 미국의 적대국으로 부상함에 따라서 미국과의 관계를 재설정할 수 있는 기회를 다시 어떻게 보면 포착하고 있다라고 말씀드릴 수 있을 것 같습니다. 중국과 자원부국인 러시아와의 협력 강화는 안정적인 자원 확보는 물론 국제금융시장에서의 위안화 영향력을 확대할 수 있는 우군을 얻는 기회로 활용될 수도 있을 것 같습니다. 하지만 중국은 그동안의 대만 병합을 위한 시도론 러시아, 우크라이나 전쟁의 여파로 당분간 감행하기 어려워지는 것 역시 사실입니다. 러시아, 우크라이나 전쟁을 지켜보면서 바다라는 천혜의 장벽 뒤에서 미국과 일본의 도움을 받으며 대비 태세를 갖추고 있는 대만을 상대로 상륙전을 감행한다. 이런 것은 현실적으로 쉽지 않다라는 것을 중국은 아마도 알게 된 것 같습니다. 그렇다고 해서 중국이 대면 병합에 대한 목표를 포기하거나 수정할 것인지 이럴 가능성에 대해서는 여전히 불투명하다라고 말씀드릴 수밖에 없을 것 같습니다. 통일이라는 목표를 변화시키지는 않겠지만 그 시간 그리고 어떠한 방법에 대해서는 여러 가지 변화가 있을 것 같습니다. 중국은 미국과 일본의 해군력을 더 먼 거리로 밀어내기 위한 노력을 강화할 수 있으며 그 와중에 서해가 어떻게 보면 예상치 못한 갈등 지역으로 부상할 가능성도 있습니다. 이러한 신냉전 체제 도래시 가장 우려되는 것 중 하나는 다른 것보다는 에너지와 식량 공급입니다. 서방 세계의 대러시아 제재는 지속될 것이기 때문에 원자재 공급난은 더욱 심화될 가능성이 높습니다. 특히 러시아가 공급하는 천연가스, 석유 등 에너지 자원, 그리고 니켈, 알루미늄, 팔라듐 등 비철금속, 그리고 비료와 밀 같은 식량 자원의 공급 부족이 앞으로 더 강화될 가능성이 있습니다. 에너지와 광물, 그리고 식량 등은 신냉전 체제 하에서 상대 진영을 압박하기 위한 수단으로 활용되는 자원의 무기화는 최소한 단기적으로는 현실화될 가능성이 높아지고 있다라고 말씀드리고 싶습니다. 유럽의 경우에는 부유한 국가들이라면 수입선을 다른 곳으로 바꾸는 수입선 대체 그리고 재생에너지 전환을 더욱 빠르게 추진하는 방식으로 대응하겠지만 경제력이 취약한 남유럽 그리고 동유럽 국가들은 당분간 석탄 발전을 유지하고 원자력 발전 비중을 높이는 방안을 추진할 것으로 생각됩니다. 미국이 러시아를 대체하는 에너지원의 공급원이 되도록 노력하겠지만 여기에는 시간이 걸릴 수밖에 없습니다. 이 과정에서 진행되는 인플레이션은 미국인들을 경제적으로 많이 힘들게 하면서 예상치 못한 국내 정치의 변화를 가져올 수도 있을 것 같습니다. 에너지와 더불어 각종 광물 자원을 둘러싼 지정학적 리스크 역시 점점 커지고 있습니다. 에너지 전환을 위해 반드시 필요한 니켈, 알루미늄, 구리, 팔라듐 이런 비철금속과 광물 자원의 지리적 편중은 문제를 더욱 어렵게 하고 있다라고 생각이 됩니다. 2022년 하반기부터는 곡물 가격 상승으로 인한 정치적 위기가 곳곳에서 나타날 가능성이 있다라고 생각됩니다. 잘 아시는 것처럼 러시아와 우크라이나는 전 세계 밀 공급의 29%를 그리고 옥수수 공급의 19%를 차지할 정도로 농업에서 차지하는 비중이 매우 크기 때문입니다. 러시아 그리고 러시아와 함께 전쟁을 치르고 있는 벨라루스는 세계적인 비료 공급 국가이기도 합니다. 이미 2021년부터 높은 가격을 형성하고 있는 비료의 공급 자체가 감소할 경우 식량 문제는 더욱 심각해질 수 있습니다. 미국과 남미에서 가뭄, 홍수 등으로 인한 작황 악화가 발생할 경우에 대외 의존도가 높고 경제력이 취약한 빈곤국가 그리고 저개발 국가들은 식량 위기를 맞이할 수밖에 없고요. 과거 아랍의 봄과 같은 정치적 격변을 불러올 가능성도 높아지고 있습니다. 사실 2010년을 전후한 과거의 튀니지, 이집트 그리고 예멘에서의 아랍의 봄 사태도 돌이켜보면 식량 위기가 주요한 원인이었음을 우리는 잊어서는 안 될 것입니다. 다른 한편으로는 러시아에 대한 제재와 압력을 높이기 위해 이란, 베네수엘라 등 그동안 미국과 적대적인 관계에 있던 국가와의 관계 개선 또는 제재 완화 역시 의외로 빠르게 진행될 가능성도 있습니다. 사실 이러한 변화는 긍정적일 수도 있지만 지역적 상황의 급변은 또 다른 위기 요인으로 작용하면서 예상치 못한 결과를 또 가져올 수 있는 위험 요소이기도 합니다. 저는 지금까지 러시아, 우크라이나 전쟁을 중심으로 발생 가능한 글로벌 지정학적 리스크를 살펴보았습니다. 돌이켜보면 2021년 말만 해도 유럽 대륙에서 국가 간의 정규전이 벌어질 것으로 예상한 사람은 누가 있었을까요? 거의 없었습니다. 우크라이나 러시아 전쟁이 이렇게 오랫동안 지속될 것이라고 생각한 사람도 드물었습니다. 저 역시 그랬고요. 모든 예측이 빗나가고 있는 상황에서 유일하게 확실한 것은 앞으로의 미래는 분명히 과거의 30년과 다를 것이다 라는 점이겠죠. 냉전 이후 협력과 공조가 주를 이루던 평화의 시대는 이제 막을 내리고 지나갔다는 점도 역시 점점 분명해지는 것 같습니다. 이러한 지정학적 위기가 글로벌 경제에 심각한 영향을 미칠 것이라는 점 역시 자명해 보입니다. 과연 세계 경제는 어떻게 될까요? 제 발표에 이어서 머니투데이의 혁신전략팀 황종덕 부국장님께서 글로벌 경제 전망을 말씀드리겠습니다. 그럼 황 국장님께 무대를 넘기겠습니다. 감사합니다.
박사님 감사합니다. 안녕하십니까? 반갑습니다. 여러분 저기 좌우에 걸려 있는 배너들 보시면 저 10년이 제가 모니터에서 일한 10년의 역사입니다. 10년 동안 저는 그동안 사실 많은 연사분들 초빙하고 발표를 도와드리고 했는데 제가 직접 올라와서 이렇게 제가 하려고 하니까 대단히 부담스럽고 긴장됩니다. 한번 잘 발표를 해보겠습니다. 소개받은 저는 K.E.Y 플랫폼 총괄 디렉터를 맡고 있는 황종덕 머니투데이 부국장입니다. 앞서 최 박사님 발표를 들으시고요. 여러분들 머릿속에 가장 먼저 떠오른 단어가 무엇이었을까요? 지정학 리스크의 대두 귀환입니다. 비록 한반도에서 멀리 떨어진 동유럽에서 벌어진 전쟁이지만 이게 우리의 운명을 좌우할 힘을 지닌 세력들 간의 충돌이기도 합니다. 따라서 이 전쟁의 향후 전개에 따라 한반도에 미칠 영향 또한 큰 진폭으로 변화할 것입니다. 이미 시작된 인플레이션과 더불어 글로벌 산업 공급망에도 큰 영향을 미칠 것입니다. 지정학 리스크를 모니터링하며 이를 파장을 선제적으로 예측하는 것이 더욱 중요해진 시기가 됐습니다. 이른바 정치경제학 사고가 필요한 시대가 돌아온 것이죠. 중요 리스크 몇 가지만 다시 한번 짚어보겠습니다. 자발적 비핵화를 선택한 우크라이나가 침공당했습니다. 따라서 북한의 핵에 대한 집착은 더 커질 것입니다. 벌써 북한은 풍계리 핵실험장 복구, 서해 인공위성 발사장 증개축에 돌입했습니다. 화성 17형 ICBM을 발사해 모라토리엄도 파기했습니다. 당분간 북한은 협상보다 핵능력 고도화에 주력할 것입니다. 최근 러시아를 공개 지지하며 북러 연대를 강화하려 하고 있는 움직임도 보입니다. 이게 고립무원의 러시아 역시 이제 북한과의 관계 강화를 마다할 이유가 없죠. 북중혈맹의 러시아까지 더해진 북중러 연대를 아마 강하게 도모할 것 같습니다. 러시아의 우크라이나 침공은 나토 회원국들의 경각심을 고조시켰습니다. 최준영 박사님 말씀대로 중립국 핀란드와 스웨덴의 나토 가입을 촉발시켰고요. 기존 가입국들의 군비 증강도 이어집니다. 미국이야 유럽 군비에 대한 부담을 낮출 수 있으니까 좋겠죠. 동시에 중국 견제를 위해 공들이고 있는 인도 태평양 전략에 힘을 쏟을 여력도 생깁니다. 중국의 친러시아 행보에 유럽 국가들은 중국을 안보 위협으로 바라보기 시작했습니다. 나토 외무장관 회의 이후 중국과 유럽의 양국 간의 설전은 무역전쟁 발생 가능성을 아주 높이고 있습니다. 영미와 EU 경제 블록이 함께 중러 권위주의 블록에 맞서 싸우게 되는 5년이 펼쳐질 가능성이 굉장히 높습니다. 자, 이 와중에 칠러냐 반러냐를 가리지 않고 자강의 바람이 전 세계에 불어닥칠 것입니다. 당장 독일부터 아까 최 박사님 이미 말씀해 주셨는데요. 이번 전쟁으로 독일은 2차 대전 전범국의 그림자였던 공격용 무기 지원의 금기를 깼습니다. 현 GDP 1.5% 수준 국방비를 2024년까지 2%로 증액키로 했고요. 대부분 유럽 국가들이 국방비 증액 대열에 동참하는 과정에 있습니다. 우리 이웃 일본도 공격형 군비 증강의 길을 걸을 것으로 예상됩니다. 다가올 5년 내 평화헌법을 개정해서 전쟁을 할 수 있는 보통국가를 강하게 지향할 것 같습니다. 이렇게 국제사회에서 보수 우경화가 두드러지고 네오나치 등의 인종차별 극단 세력이 준동할 것으로 우려되고 있습니다. 실제로 우크라이나 전쟁에 참전하고 있는 국제의용군 중 일부가 네오나치 세력이라는 분석이 이미 나왔죠. 국가 간 대결의 수면 아래 극단주의 세력이 힘을 키우는 중입니다. 이를 방증하듯 이번 프랑스 대선에서 르펜의 장마리 르펜의 지지율이 마크롱 현 대통령 지지율을 턱밑같이 쫓아갔었습니다. 극우 세력의 결집과 준동은 글로벌 인플레이션 시기, 대중들이 고통받는 시기에 새로운 위협의 도화선이 될 것 같습니다. 머니투데이 키 플랫폼 글로벌 리스크 취재팀이 만난 전문가들은 앞으로 5년 글로벌 인플레이션 리스크가 이 때문에 가장 큰 경제적 공포가 될 것이라고 입을 모았습니다. 인플레이션과 경기 침체를 동시에 맞는 스태그플레이션의 암문조차 지금 드리워지기 시작했습니다. 글로벌 경제를 좌우할 미국은 자국 인플레이션을 막을 때까지 금리 인상을 멈출 수가 없습니다. 연쇄적으로 신흥국들은 금융위기를 맞을 것입니다. 미국에 대항하는 중국도 부동산 거품, 그림자 금융, 숨은 기업 부채가 한꺼번에 터질 수 있습니다. 미국은 지난달 소비자 물가 상승률이 8.5%로 1981년 이후 가장 높게 나타났습니다. 미국 인플레이션은 지난 2월 이미 40년 만에 최고치로 상승했습니다. 그런데 아직 고점이 아니랍니다. 물가가 올라 생산을 자극하여 경기를 호황으로 끌고 가는 것이 인플레이션 기대 효과인데 지금 소비자 물가 상승은 다른 양상입니다. 러시아에 대한 경제 제재는 원유, 천연가스, 식량까지 각종 원자재 거래 비용을 급증하게 만듭니다. 국제유가는 2008년 이래 최고치로 올랐고요. 천연가스, 곡물 등도 각종 원자재 가격도 천정부시로 치솟고 있습니다. 이로 인해 세계 각국에서 인플레이션이 심화되고 있습니다. 여기에 끊어진 글로벌 공급망, 미국의 중국에 대한 견제 등으로 생산비는 높아질 수밖에 없는 상황입니다. 인플레이션 대응용 통화긴축 정책이 맞물려서 경기 침체 위협이 높아지고 있습니다. 이미 경기 침체 전조현상으로 꼽히는 장단기 국채 수익률 역전 현상도 목격됐습니다. 1955년 이후에 장단기 국채 수익률 역전 현상이 발생했을 때 경기 침체는 어김없이 따라왔습니다. 미국 금리 인상에 따른 글로벌 금리의 추격 상승, 유동성 축소에 따른 투자 심리 위축, 원자재 가격 상승, 이 세 가지가 잇따라 전개되면 글로벌 스태그플레이션으로 이어집니다. 그 중간 과정에서 우리가 볼 수 있는 단계가 신흥국 금융위기입니다. 과거 사례를 통해서 우리는 충분히 이걸 예측해 볼 수 있습니다. 1994년 미국은 1년 동안 6차례나 금리를 올렸습니다. 때문에 연 3%나 3%포인트 금리가 인상됐고요. 그 다음에 1995년 2월 기준금리가 마침내 6%에 도달했습니다. 그 결과 어땠습니까? 중남미, 동아시아, 러시아 등 신흥국들은 차례로 급격한 자본 유출에 따른 외환위기를 겪어야 했습니다. 여러분 잘 아시듯이 그 여파가 한국에 닿았죠. 1997년. 근데 이번에는 그때보다 충격이 더 클 수 있습니다. 왜냐하면 최근 2-3년 동안 신흥국들은 코로나 팬데믹 극복을 위해서 부채를 마구 키워왔습니다. 미국 금리 인상으로 신흥국들은 이제 부채를 줄이기가 어려워질 겁니다. 달러화 가치가 계속 높아져가지고 신흥국들은 달러 표시 외채 상환에 허덕일 수밖에 없습니다. 이런 상황에서 미국이 공격적으로 금리를 인상하고 자산 축소를 단행하면 신흥국에 유입됐던 자본은 빠르게 이탈하고요. 신흥국의 국고 통화 가치는 급락할 수밖에 없습니다. 경제 펀더멘털이 취약한 신흥국부터 디폴트가 발생할 거고 이 신흥국 디폴트 도미노가 결국 글로벌 금융위기로 이어질 가능성이 높습니다. 근데 지난 두 번의 금융위기 당시 고통을 우리는 너무나 잘 기억하고 있습니다. 근데 과거에는 그래도 글로벌 경제 구원투수가 있었습니다. 바로 중국이었습니다. 근데 이번에 중국한테 이 역할을 기대할 수가 있을까요? 어려울 것 같습니다. 지금 중국이 글로벌 경제 리스크 핵이 될 수 있다고 생각합니다. 전 세계 모든 나라들과 반대로 중국은 지금 금리를 내리고 있습니다. 경기 침체와 신용위협을 막기 위한 건데 이게 지금 중국 경제 상황이 얼마나 심각한지를 보여주고 있는 겁니다. 중국은 2015년 신용위기 이후에 등장한 3마리 회색 코뿔소가 취약점이라고 계속 지적받아 왔습니다. 회색 코뿔소라는 건 눈에 보이지만 방심하다 돌진해 오면 막기 어려운 큰 리스크를 말합니다. 중국은 부동산 거품, 그림자 금융, 높은 수준의 부채가 3마리 회색 코뿔소입니다. 지난해 헝다그룹 위기에서 보듯이 부채 문제는 굉장히 해묵은 이슈지만 언제든 중국 경제를 위기로 몰아갈 수 있는 그런 시한폭탄 같은 것입니다. 저희가 인터뷰한 전문가들 대부분이 중국 기업 부채 문제를 단순히 금융산업 분야만의 문제로 보지 않았습니다. 특히 중국의 외환 보유고는 미국 통화 정책의 영향을 많이 받습니다. 실제로 영향을 많이 주기도 하고요. 근데 중국의 외화 유동성이 충분하지 않으면 미국 금리 인상과 자산 축소에 중국은 예상치 못한 외환 위기를, 중국이 외환 위기를 맞을 수도 있습니다. 지금까지 중국 금융기관 대부분이 중국 정부 소유이기도 하고 또 그 영역 안에 있기 때문에 외화 유동성이 풍부하기 때문에 금융위기 발생은 어렵다, 뭐 그런 신화가 있었습니다. 하지만 이미 중국 외환 보유고와 필요 외환 보유고 간 차이는 많이 축소되고 있습니다. 필요 외환 보유고의 차이가 많이 축소되고 있다는 점 한 번 더 강조드리겠습니다. 즉 외환 보유고 자체 규모가 중요한 게 아니라 필요 외환 보유고를 얼마나 채우고 있느냐가 중요한데 이게 줄고 있습니다. 또 문제가 있습니다. 지금 베이징 봉쇄 들어갔죠. 중국 코로나가 제2유행 조짐입니다. 오늘 한국은 5만 명대로 떨어졌습니다. 저희는 이제 엔데믹을 향해서 나간다고 얘기하지만 아직은 모르겠습니다만 중국은 아직 이걸 맞지 않았습니다. 때문에 경제활동이 계속 위축되고 있습니다. 강력한 코로나 대응 조치는 특히 글로벌 공급망 훼손으로 이어질 겁니다. 어쨌든 여전히 세계 공정으로 중요한 생산 거점인 중국에서 일단 글로벌 자동차 공장들의 가동이 멈췄습니다. 이 고질적인 세 마리 회색 코뿔소 문제 때문에 문제에다가 이런 코로나로 생긴 예기치 못한 문제까지 더해진다면 이거를 보통 전문가들은 퍼펙트 스톰이라고 부르고요. 중국발 퍼펙트 스톰이 불 수도 있다는 것입니다. 중국은 향후 5년 전 세계 성장의 5분의 1 이상을 차지할 것으로 예상되어 왔습니다. 그만큼 중국 경제의 장기 침체는 우리한테 상상하기 어려운 위기를 가져올 것입니다. 한국도 전체 수출의 4분의 1이 중국입니다. 의존도가 너무 높습니다. 때문에 중국 경제에 우리는 아주 민감할 수밖에 없습니다. 이런 중국이 미국과 치열하게 벌이는 패권 경쟁도 우리에겐 커다란 리스크입니다. 미국이 기술 동맹을 기반으로 중국에 대한 견제와 압박 수위를 높이면 중국으로선 단기간에 이를 극복할 방법 없습니다. 중국 정부의 권위주의적인 경제 통제 정책이 기업들의 혁신 역량과 성장성을 약화시키고 과다한 보조금 의존 투자 정책이 미국과의 기술 패권 경쟁에서 오히려 리스크로 작용하고 있습니다. 중국 근로자 임금 상승과 농민공 불평등 문제, 급격한 고령화, 중국도 급격한 고령화를 맞고 있습니다. 이런 내부 문제들은 중국의 체제 안정을 위협하는 상황까지 현재 이르는 것으로 파악하고 있습니다. 이 중국의 경제 부진은 근데 중국만의 문제가 아닙니다. 중국이 공급하는 가성비 높은 중간재에 의존해왔던 글로벌 제조업은 공급망 교란으로 높은 생산 비용을 이제 감수해야 할 것입니다. 앞으로 3에서 5년 사이 새로 들어선 우리 정부가 함께 헤쳐가야 할 글로벌 경제 주요 리스크를 일단 한번 짚어봤습니다. 직면한 인플레이션, 스태그플레이션 가능성에 정교한 매뉴얼 대응이 필요할 것 같습니다. 한국한테는 이를 극복한 경험이 있긴 합니다. 1997년, 2008년 경험처럼 일단 안전자산 선호 경향에 따라서 해외 투자 자금이 막 빠져나가고 따라오는 원화 가치 하락을 우리가 읽을 수가 있습니다. 그렇다면 지금 당장 세계적 금리 인상 기조에 우리도 민첩하게 속도와 규모로 금리를 올려가면서 유동성을 확보해야 될 것 같습니다. 잘 하실 거라 믿습니다. 이 부분은. 근데 좀 더 나가서요. 저는 이 자리에서 대한민국 위상을 이번 위기에 기회로 만들어 세계 10위권에서 좀 더 G7 안으로 다가서게 만드는 능동적, 적극적 대응에 대해서 말씀드리고 싶습니다. 전 세계를 엄습하는 경기 침체의 전차를, 탱크를 한반도 앞에서 멈춰 세울 세 발의 천궁을 한번 생각해 봤습니다. 첫 번째 천궁은 한국형 삼축 체제의 강화입니다. 지난 5년의 평화정착 노력에도 불구하고 북한의 핵능력 고도화, 가속화는 피할 수 없는 현실입니다. 북한 도발도 일상화됐습니다. 정말 이젠 뭐 놀랍지도 않습니다. 뻔한 이야기지만 문제는 제대로 실행하지 못했다는 건데요. 북한 도발에 대한 원칙적 대응에서 시작해서 한미 동맹 강화, 한일 협력 체제의 복원을 지향하고 이제는 반드시 실행해야 합니다. 삼축 체제 강화를 위해 확장된 억제력의 제고는 지정학 리스크에 민감한 대한민국이 반드시 이뤄내야 할 일입니다. 이를 통해서 한미 포괄적 전략 동맹 격상을 반드시 이뤄내야 할 거라고 생각합니다. 둘째는 강화되는 나토 결속력에 우리도 올라타야죠. 편승하여 한국의 우호적인 동유럽 국가들과의 전략적 연대에 집중하는 것입니다. 이번 전쟁을 통해 나토, 유럽은 반러시아 중국 동맹으로 정치 경제학적 스탠스를 잡은 걸로 파악하고 있습니다. 러시아는 물론 향후 중국과의 무역에서도 상호간 충돌로 인해 이 나라들은 교역이 줄어들 가능성이 높습니다. 그 줄어든 자리에 대한민국의 기술, 상품, 서비스를 채움으로써 경제 영통을 확장하는 것입니다. 한국과의 교류에 적극적인 나라들로 이 자리에 와 계신 루마니아 연사분들, 루마니아, 폴란드, 불가리아, 조지아 등이 있습니다. 이들 국가에 더 많이 투자해서 지금보다 더 많은 산업 분야를 현지화하고요. 한국형 운영 노하우를 K 스탠다드로 수출해서 운영 시스템을 교류한다면 강력한 정치 경제적 우군이 될 수 있습니다. 동맹이 될 수 있습니다. 국방, 바이오, 원전 에너지, 항만 교통 인프라 시스템 운영 등이 유망한 분야라고 합니다. 마지막 천공은 기후, 식량난, 전염병 등 전 세계가 직면한 문제를 한국이 선도적으로 해결할 수 있도록 해당 분야에 적극적으로 기술 투자를 하고 인재를 육성하는 것입니다. 전염병 분야만 하더라도 비록 백신은 늦어졌을지 모르지만 전염병을 막을 수 있는 한국산 진단키트, 의료기기, 의료 소모품의 우수한 품질은 이미 세계적으로 정평이 나 있습니다. 글로벌 식량난을 이겨낼 대한민국 오리진의 우수 곡물 품종이 아프리카로 현재 뻗어나오고 있는 중이기도 합니다. 한국이 가진 탄탄한 제조 기술 역량에 디지털 응용 기술을 결합해서 K 스탠다드를 지금 같은 격변기에 확산시킨다면 어느덧 전 세계 다양한 지역, 많은 분야에서 우리 기술과 상품, 서비스를 자연스럽게 받아들이는 아미들과 마주하게 될 것입니다. 지금까지 경청해 주셔서 감사드리고요. 제 발표 이후에 글로벌 전문가 심층 토론과 오늘 오후부터 내일까지 진행될 브레이크아웃 세션, 두 번째 총회 등에서 내일 이어질 두 번째 총회 등에서 더 상세한 분석과 전망 대안을 여러분과 함께 나누겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Mr. Che and Mr. Huang, for those two presentations. I'm really curious about your thoughts about the first session and the two presentations. Personally, I am particularly interested in the three-missile concept that Drake mentioned. I hope that the Republic of Korea will overcome the global risks and turn the crisis into opportunities. I have high expectations, especially on the second missile, a proposal that Korea would or should actively interact with Eastern European countries, especially after the war in Ukraine, to create new opportunities. So we have invited fantastic global experts to talk specifically about how Korea can expand its economic interests in Eastern Europe and find the best approach to interacting with Eastern European countries. We will watch an introductory video of the panelists who are going to join me here on the stage in a second. So please join me. Okay. We're waiting for all the panelists to join us. Yes, perfect. So we have heard fantastic presentations. We have heard an amazing chat at the very beginning, and we have seen the last 2 months since Russia invaded Ukraine. There's been quite a unity on the global stage, but at the same time, we see that some things might change in the next few weeks or months. We have already seen that Russia stopped providing gas to, I believe, 3 countries by now. But at the same time, we have, I believe, 10 countries that have already decided to pay in rubles for the gas. I think 4 buyers have already done so. So in this very panel discussion, I would like to talk about what you think will happen, going forward, and how the situation will unfold, but also what potentially the next step of Mr. Putin might be, and finally, how to, maybe most importantly, how the Republic of Korea can identify opportunities and benefit from them. So to start, I would like to ask all of you about your opinion on the situation currently and your reaction to what we have heard a moment ago. So I'll start with Niall.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the extremely kind invitation to speak this morning. And this is a tremendous conference. I think at a critically important time on the international stage. This is a time of crisis for Europe. The biggest war in Europe that we have seen since World War II. We have the Russians behaving in an absolutely barbaric and horrific manner, invading a sovereign free nation. And the stakes are incredibly high, because if we let the Russians get away with this, this monstrous savagery and barbarism, because this is what it is. What the Russians are doing in Ukraine amounts to, really, it's an affront to civilization, to civilized values. They're killing men, women, children. They are carrying out horrific human rights atrocities, war crimes, acts of ethnic cleansing, acts of genocide. And, we cannot allow this to happen, because if the Russians get away with this, this sends the message to the rest of the world that it's open season on the free world. If we let tyrants like Vladimir Putin get away with this kind of evil, what message does this send also to the likes of China, North Korea, to Iran? And so we must uphold, the principle of the defense of national sovereignty, the defense of self-determination. And this is why it's absolutely right that the nations of the free world are doing all they possibly can to support the people of Ukraine at this time. And the outcome of what happens in Ukraine impacts, I think, the entire free world. It matters not only for Europe, it matters for the United States as the world superpower, it matters for America's allies in this region here. So we heard the comments from the Vice Chairman, the CEO of the Federation for Korean Industry this morning. Incredibly sound comments, wonderful remarks, but he reminded us of what is at stake with regard to the Russian invasion. And so what happens with Ukraine, it impacts South Korea as well. South Korea has a keen interest in helping to ensure that the Ukrainian people are able to preserve their sovereignty, their freedom, and their self-determination.
I will relate to what Mr. Gwang actually said as well. He said that we don't see enough attention. He mentioned South Korea, but do you think that we see this attention, this awareness across the world, enough awareness and enough attention around the world to what is happening in Ukraine?
It's a great question, because certainly there is already a sort of sense of fatigue that's building in some parts of the world with regard to what's happening in Ukraine. Certainly my view is that Ukraine is so fundamentally important to the future of the free world that we need to be paying attention in every part of the world to what is happening in Ukraine, because the implications for what happens there are so hugely important, which is why, for example, the Chinese are so closely following the outcome and trying to influence perhaps the outcome as well. the Iranian regime is closely following the developments. There's no coincidence the fact that the Russians and Iran are closely coordinating behind the scenes with regard to all of the negotiations that are taking place with regard to Iran's nuclear program, which is why we think at the Heritage Foundation it would be absolutely disastrous for the United States to support a revival of the Iran nuclear deal. That would, of course, benefit not only the Iranian regime, the world's biggest state sponsor of terrorism, it also benefits Russia as well. Russia has a keen interest in getting this deal revived. So the United States and US allies must not fall into that trap. But this is like a big sort of jigsaw puzzle on the international stage. You cannot separate what's happening in Ukraine from some of the bigger geostrategic goals that our adversaries, the enemies of the free world, have. So we must not be complacent in any way. And what happens in Ukraine is going to have an extraordinary impact, I think, on the international stage, not just in this year, but for many, many years to come. And we need to ensure that the side of righteousness, that the side of freedom, sovereignty, self-determination, liberty prevails and wins.
Thank you very much for that. Eric, what's your take on what is happening and also how this might unfold, going forward?
So thank you for the opportunity again to the conference organizers. It's an honor to be here. My involvement in Ukraine goes back 15 years ago when I was a Peace Corps volunteer in Donbass and served for 2 years in Donbass. So it's quite shocking today to witness cities and towns where I spent my youth to come under attack. Where is it going? How it will unfold? Those are good questions. So a lot of talk has been around authoritarianism versus democracy, but I think fundamentally, and it is interesting in fact because of your new president-elect's involvement in anti-corruption initiatives in Korea, is a theme of corruption. Corruption as a source of decay or corrosion at the fundamental levels for both markets and democracy. If a system is corrupt, it undermines a population's faith in those free markets and democracy. And with that shaken faith, populists can step into the void, authoritarians can step into the void, and undermine the very sources of wealth and prosperity that originally gave birth to the process. And so I think that it's interesting to watch here in Korea how the new president will orient his policies around corruption in Korea. And I think that perhaps that there's a role to play here for Korea in ensuring high quality, given the fact that Korea is a major exporter in the region and around the world, high quality foreign direct investment. This is something the OECD is working on right now. I think it'll be a major focus going forward. Not only job creation or the kind of tax implications of investment into emerging markets and democracies, but how that impacts and strengthens or weakens market systems and democratic systems within those countries. And that's what I talk about at CEYP when I talk about corrosive versus constructive capital, where this capital entering a market can either corrode or undermine those market institutions that has made Korea such a great market and a democracy, or it can weaken them. And Korea has a role here, the United States has a role here to play, to making sure that the quality of the FDI entering the market goes to strengthen those. And that's the secret weapon against authoritarianism and rising populism.
Thank you for that. We're going to talk about opportunities as well, and also, exploring Central and Eastern Europe a little bit later. I want to go back to the current situation and how this will unfold, and I'll ask Alex about his take on that.
Thank you. And thank you very much for the invitation, for being here in person to MoneyToday, to K.E.Y Platform. I think we have seen in the past month, and also on the screen today, a lot of words which are familiar but are also new to this region. NATO, Cold War. The challenges of 60 and 70 years ago are here today with us. It is not by chance that a mentality, a A person that was educated during the 70s and the 80s of the Cold War is here bringing the Cold War back to us today. As far as NATO is concerned, which I wear an Atlantic hat here in this panel, I think NATO as an alliance has opened itself to new countries in the past 20 years. Not aggressively, as some have claimed, like Putin claims.
Yes, definitely.
But nevertheless, this is a moment that has brought the alliance members and partners together. I have to say that NATO is not only an alliance of the North Atlantic, but it's an alliance that has a Mediterranean dimension. It has partners in the Pacific. It is not new that Korea has a strategic dialogue with NATO for the past 10 years. And this is bringing really all of us back to talking about security, global strategic risks. And at the end of the day, at the NATO summit that we will see in Madrid this summer, we are also talking about fundamental values. We are talking about institutions that need to function and not to be threatened. Our countries in Central and Eastern Europe have lived through the experience that countries in this part of the world have seen. A Cold War which is being brought to our doorstep with nuclear, with military, and with threats that are not allowing our countries to consolidate their democratic institutions.
Mm-hmm. And Soren, finally over to you. How do you see what is happening, not only in Ukraine, but all over the world, affecting the future?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm very grateful to be here, and I want to thank as well to the organizers of this event for the invitation. Andrew, I'll try to bring a pure entrepreneurial perspective to this situation, as this is what I'm doing. I'm a pure entrepreneur. I started a real estate development platform in Eastern Europe 20 years ago. I think definitely the world is experiencing a transformative process, and this is dominated by threats, but by opportunities as well. And it is unthinkable that we have to live in our days a conventional war very close to the border of Romania, the country where I'm coming from. But I think what we have experienced now is what we actually, in business, is what we actually started to experience 2 years ago, since COVID-19 pandemic started. And I'm referring here to the disrupted deliveries and the global supply chain issues that started in February 2020. So what we see now, also as a matter and as an issue created by the war in Ukraine, is constant transformation of the supply chain. And this is what we are very focused on. This was also triggered in the past couple of years by the evolution and the rise of e-commerce as well, because logistics has to transform the overall process, and it's something that we already faced for a number of years. What we see now also different is this crisis in the energy sector. That is probably going to hit very hard all economies in the Western world. What we can do as business leaders, I think we can cultivate resilience in our companies, and that means that we should adopt new competitive strategies based on more flexibility, adaptability, and agility. And this is what we are trying to do also with our platform in Central Eastern Europe. I pled also for an integrated view over the whole supply chain. And that means from the manufacturer's door to the final consumer. And there were disruptions not only because of the many borders closed during the pandemic, but also because of the long distances between the production units and the final users or clients. And that means, in our view, a new context. That means the reorganization of the production processes, decentralization of the production and of the logistics. So this is our view in the actual context.
So Eric actually started talking about foreign direct investment into Central and Eastern Europe, and we've seen companies from Korea coming to countries like Poland, for instance. I think, as far as I remember, there was a massive investment of SK coming to the country last year. But apart from that, I believe Poland is the main sort of beneficiary of FDI from Korea. How do you see this aspect, all of you again, this question will be, my question will always be pretty much to all of you, unfolding again, and in those current circumstances actually, is there an opportunity? Do you see that? And whoever wants to go first, go ahead, Alex.
The phrase "untapped potential" is an expression that needs to be put on the table with regards to not only the country that I come from, Romania, but also the region. In the past number of years, a new initiative which is known as the 3 Cs initiative.
Yes.
And I mention seas here because these seas, the Nordic Sea, the Black Sea, and the Adriatic Sea, connect a region which to many people is known as Central Europe, Southeast Europe. Some refer to it as former communist Central Europe. These countries have come together to really state that in 3 key areas of opportunities: in energy, in transportation and infrastructure, and in digital and IT, the region is taking steps by promoting specific projects to attract not only foreign investment, but also to develop the infrastructure in these areas and to make the region more resilient. This is a market of 280, 300 million consumers that are fastly promoting investment in these areas to attract investments from Europe, from North America, and also, why not, from Asia. And from this point of view, Korea needs to find out more about these opportunities that the region offers.
Niall, Eric, sorry.
Yeah, I'll jump in there. And you talked about the importance of Poland, and Poland really is on the front line, I would say, on the frontier of freedom in Europe, together with the Baltic states, and the role that Poland is playing in terms of supporting Ukraine is absolutely huge. And Poland has taken in, I think it's something like at least 2 million, maybe more
than
actually,
that, almost 3 million.
3 million refugees from Ukraine, and the spirit of the Polish people, that big-hearted generosity is really a tremendous sort of example for the whole of Europe. And without a doubt, I think the role that Poland and the Baltic states are playing here so incredibly important, because if Putin succeeds in his goals with Ukraine, he's going to set his sights next upon Poland and the Baltic states. And the Poles, they know this. And they understand that this is not just some sort of academic exercise looking at what's happening in Ukraine. This is a war for survival for the Ukrainian people.
Correct.
And the Poles understand that, and they know they'll be next if Putin prevails. And so, from the perspective here, in South Korea, the developments in Eastern Europe, of course, I think really do matter for the South Korean people as well, because not only, of course, to the South Koreans, I think they really understand, the importance of defending freedom, fighting for freedom. They've done this themselves. They know what it means to stand up to totalitarianism, to communism, and Putin wants to rebuild a sort of Russian Empire. He harks back to the days of the Soviet Union. He may not be a self-identified communist, but he wants to sort of rebuild the Soviet Empire. And I think the South Korean people understand, better than anyone in Asia, the importance of the willingness of free nations to fight to defend that freedom in the face of totalitarian tyranny. So the war in Ukraine, it may be many, many thousands of miles away, but this is also a conflict that touches the hearts and the minds of the South Korean people. We have, as our Heritage Foundation founder, Dr. Edwin Fulner, discussed earlier today, an exciting new conservative administration coming into office here in Seoul. An administration, clearly, I think, that is going to be taking a very big picture approach towards Korean leadership, strengthening the US-South Korean alliance and partnership, but also I think that increasingly, with a conservative administration coming in, they're going to be closely watching what happens with the NATO alliance. There's going to be enhanced cooperation between South Korea and NATO partners and allies, including our friends and partners, Eastern and Central Europe. And so this is an important moment, I think, for South Korea, for South Korean leadership, not only in this region, but also in terms of strengthening the ties between Seoul and South Korea's allies and partners in Europe.
I would like to actually build on your answer. Alex mentioned the 3 Cs initiative. You mentioned the role of Poland and the Baltic countries right now. And I've heard multiple times that the importance of the region of Central and Eastern Europe is becoming more and more substantial. And do you see that this part of the world might actually be the center of future, decision-making process?
Yeah, that's a great question, because if you look at what is happening in Eastern and Central Europe and the key role that they are playing right now in this conflict with Russia, which is the direct result of Putin's actions here, where is the leadership coming from in Europe standing up to Vladimir Putin? And Putin is a monster. He's a tyrant. He's the modern-day equivalent of Adolf Hitler, frankly. But where is the leadership in Europe coming from, standing up to Putin? It's coming from Poland. It's coming from the Baltic states. It's coming from Eastern and Central European countries, together also with Great Britain in the Brexit era. It's not coming from, the heart of, what Donald Rumsfeld called old Europe, Germany and France. You look at the appeasement of Russia by the Germans because of energy dependency. It's absolutely appalling. If you look at the mixed signals sent by Emmanuel Macron in France, a great deal of confusion in terms of the strategic thinking. You talk to leaders from Eastern Europe about what is at stake, what needs to be done. There is crystal clear thinking, which sends a clear message that these countries really understand what is at stake in Europe. They understand the importance of free nations standing up against the forces of tyranny and evil, which is why I think it's so important for leading Asian powers such as South Korea to be looking at Europe not just in terms of the traditional European powers, Berlin, Paris, Brussels, but looking forward to a new Europe where you have the likes of Poland, for example, taking an extremely important leadership role, but also, of course, the tremendous role that Britain is playing in the Brexit era as well, I think is great for South Korea as well. And I think that there's tremendous opportunity for powerful ties to be developed between Seoul and London in the Brexit era. The British are really leading in Europe right now. And I think that, that is also a moment as well for a newly reinvigorated, even more powerful partnership between South Korea and the United Kingdom.
Thank you very much for that. Eric, Soren, what's your take on that?
I'd like to pick up off of a word that I heard, spirit, right? So what is a spirit? And so when we talk about spirit, why are the Ukrainians doing so well, right? It's because I think in the last 8 years, there's been a transformative transformation in Ukrainian society, civil society, government, with expectations that they are a free people, that they have a free market, that on their sovereign territory they can do what they want. And they believe, and my nephew in Kiev believes that his children will have a better future than he has had, right? That he knows that it's going to be tough for his generation. Just like many Koreans knew that it was tough and they were building a better future for their children and their grandchildren. So that is the perspective of free people. And that's really what we can't measure in economics. And that goes back to the cooperation, the quality of these FDIs, those positive externalities that companies from South Korea can produce in Central and Eastern Europe. The Korean companies engaging in high quality investment, providing not only jobs, but engaging with local civil society organizations, strengthening the rule of law, reducing corruption, and overall providing more opportunity and more wealth for more people in the region. And I think that's really what we have to pay attention to. Not simply the number of the investment, the dollar number or the euro number, but all the positive externalities, the values that come with the investment into Central and Eastern Europe. And I think that's really where South Korea has a higher value potential than other, say, autocratic capitalist models in this region who shall remain unnamed.
Thank you for that. I would definitely add or relate to what you said about the last 8 years, because I don't think a lot of people around the world were clear about what happened back in 2014 when Russia actually invaded Ukraine, or the eastern part. The spirit of the nation changed dramatically, and the country, most probably the biggest reason why they are defending the country as they are is because of exactly that unity that was created back in 2014. Soren, how do you see, and what's your opinion on what we were just talking about?
Speaking for untapped potential, what Alex was saying, I want to give you a perfect example for this kind of places in Central Eastern Europe. We started a huge investment a few years ago in Constanza. It's the most eastern city on the border of European Union and NATO. It's the most eastern border. It's the most urbanized city in Romania, Romania being the second largest country in Central Eastern Europe after Poland, with more than 500,000 people. It's served by all modern transportation means. It's connected to railway, highway. It has direct access to sea, to Danube, and also is served by 2 airports. We found there a huge potential in terms of human resources, infrastructure, but also attitude and spirit. And this is something quite unique. Dr. Fulner said that this is something very characteristic for Eastern Europe more than for Western Europe. I think this kind of untapped potential is there, and it could serve for the economic expansion purposes of South Korea as well. And I think we also have to consider what many people are saying for years already. Last time I read it in a letter issued by Larry Fink from BlackRock to the CEOs, his client's company, saying that the form of capitalism is not anymore what we used to be, the capitalism of the shareholders, but it's the capitalism of stakeholders. So we should pay more attention in the coming years, not necessarily to the profit, but to the way we integrate our employees, our communities where we are investing in, and the other entities around our business environment. So, again, I believe Central Eastern Europe is still an untapped potential, and this kind of places like Constanza you can still find there.
Yeah, I think the talent is definitely the biggest advantage that the region has. I wanted to ask all of you again about Central and Eastern Europe, but looking at the region from a a bit different perspective. A couple of weeks ago, I had an interesting discussion with a former minister of industry in France, and we were discussing how Ukraine could be rebuilt after the war. And the first thing that he said was, it would be good for the Ukrainians to learn from other nations what they can do and how they can rebuild the country. And he gave the example of Estonia and the digital transformation process that the country has gone through. And he had absolutely no idea that Ukraine is not far behind Estonia when it comes to digital transformation and the digitalization of public services. I think that it's important to say that emerging Europe or Central and Eastern Europe a few years ago, a couple of days ago, was actually imitating other countries, the West or the Asian tigers as well. But now the time has come that those countries are actually not imitating, but they are actually innovating. So my question to you would be, how do you see, or what do you see Korea could actually learn from Central and Eastern Europe? Alex, go ahead.
If I can pick up on innovation, a report that was issued a couple of years ago by the McKinsey company identifies Central and Eastern Europe as digital challengers, a community of countries that have identified digitalization, innovation. We see a lot of work in the countries in our region on cybersecurity, excellence in artificial intelligence, investing in this field as a potential engine of economic growth for the next 20 to 30 years. It goes back to what I was saying before, that the region is ripe for investment in energy and transportation, but also digital IT, telecom. This is something that we look to Western Europe for models, but we also look to South Korea and to other countries that have led the way in this area. We need to do more in Central and Eastern Europe, and that's why the message to countries that have led the way in this field is one of untapped potential and welcome contribution. But it is not only in this area. I think energy, as the region is looking to diversify away from natural resources coming from Russia and from the east, is an opportunity that is opening green energy, renewables, nuclear technologies, and that's something that South Korea has experience in. And last but not least, transportation infrastructure, again, is an area that construction companies, building infrastructure in this area is going to attract a lot of investment in the future.
So innovation versus imitation, Eric.
So I think that what would be fascinating would be to have a bit of exchange of business cultures between Korea and Central and Eastern Europe. Korea, with its tribal system and how the state has facilitated some of those leaders, I think that some Central and Eastern European countries could learn from that, investing in key industries, specifically with some state support, some tax breaks, something along those lines. I don't think Central and Eastern Europe has done that quite so well thus far, and I think South Korea has done it very well. In exchange, I think that Central and Eastern Europe could teach South Korea a bit of that bottom-up, ruthless entrepreneurism. That if you've built a business in Central and Eastern Europe over the past 30 years, you're a darn good entrepreneur. You typically try to avoid the state as much as possible. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but you are, for your business, maximizing your alpha as much as possible. And I think that those two cultures intermingling would produce some really excellent results.
Niall, anything you would like to add to?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because if you look at the level of destruction in Ukraine, what the Russians are doing, I mean, leveling cities, you haven't seen scenes like that in Europe, really, on this large scale since World War II, with the possible exception of, you saw it in Chechnya with Grozny and the Russians, wherever the Russians go, they devastate things, basically. They don't have, they don't care about the loss of human life. They don't care about leveling cities to the ground. And you saw it in Chechnya, you saw it in Syria as well. You're seeing it in Ukraine right now. And, the level of reconstruction, redevelopment that's going to be required in Ukraine over the course of the next decade is going to be absolutely massive. And so it's going to be not only the role of European countries to help Ukraine to rebuild, but Ukraine is going to need support from across the free world. And I think, South Korea, with its own experience of rebuilding after war decades ago, with its own experience of having, fought a war for survival, literally, against the forces of totalitarianism. And so South Korea, from its own experience, can help Ukraine with its redevelopment. And I think South Korea's role will be an important role. And we can't underestimate, just the immense scale of the devastation that is taking place right now. And it's going to involve, a level of investment, reconstruction, that is going to be perhaps the biggest that Europe has seen since World War II, on an epic scale.
So we've been trying to encourage Korean investors, entrepreneurs, to come over to Central and Eastern Europe. China has been in the region for quite some time already. I'm talking about 13+1 and other frameworks as well. How do you see the competition between Korea and China? Would that be a challenge for Korean companies? Anyone? Alex?
Challenge, but also opportunity.
Okay.
This goes back to, I think, what Eric was saying before. Transparency of foreign investments is something that welcomes you across the region. Ability to understand European standards in areas like public tenders. Chinese companies have been constantly challenged in public tenders in Central and Eastern Europe because of the perception that you are the state, you are a big player, and you just assume that because there is or isn't a political deal, you can become the chosen partner. Romania and other countries in the region have passed legislation that puts at the top of the priority list transparency of foreign investment. Where is the capital coming from? What Eric was saying before about corrosive capital, constructive capital, is something that is well known as language to this room and to the community of like-minded countries in North America and Europe and in South Korea. So these are opportunities that immediately welcome, I think, companies that come from South Korea. China has been through 13+1, through various projects, including Belt and Road.
Yes.
But these are also slowing down. In the case of Romania, the nuclear project that they were vying for has changed focus. Also, we have passed legislation that requires technological and shareholding transparency with regards to telecommunications. And so that's something that companies in this country will find welcoming to the region.
Tremendous question. I'm glad you've raised the issue of China, which, alongside the war in Ukraine right now, the overall challenge that China poses for the United States as the world's superpower. The China issue is huge on the horizon for U.S. strategic thinkers. And, certainly my view is that any country that has collaborated with Russia over the invasion of Ukraine in any way should not have any role in reconstruction or rebuilding. And it has to be said, I think that the Chinese, certainly behind the scenes, have been closely collaborating with Moscow on multiple fronts. There may have been some disagreements here and there, but the reality is that Moscow and Beijing closely coordinate on so many foreign policy matters, whether it's Ukraine to Iran to North Korea. And you cannot trust any Chinese involvement, frankly, in the future of Ukraine. And I don't think that the Ukrainian government's going to be open to that because, at the end of the day, Beijing's strategic interests are not the same interests as those of the free world. And so I do think that Ukraine's leaders are going to be very crystal clear in their approach on this. And I don't think that, Chinese involvement or intervention is going to be welcome.
We have already seen how Ukraine or President Zelensky reacted to Germany when they were particularly slow. Soren and Eric, how do you think Korean investors and entrepreneurs can be perceived better than Chinese ones?
I have a practical experience with both kind of companies in Romania and in other countries in Central Eastern Europe. So I'm dealing as we speak with South Korean companies and with Chinese companies. In terms of business and cultural approach, there is a difference, definitely. And I can say it quite straightforward. The South Korean companies are more used with whatever means European legislations, compliance processes, transparency, and so on. And moreover, I think the major difference is the attitude towards a key word named joint venture. They are more open to create partnerships, to open and to disclose information about their real intentions when it comes to talking about a new production plant in Europe. You have to become very open. So this is a major difference and is something that you can easily see in the delivery process. Yeah. So you faster and you better advance in one part than in the other. Speaking for what Vice Chair Kwon said before, I would love to see more South Korean engineers in Europe, in Central Eastern Europe. And I would love to see this kind of joint teams combining the two deep pool of technical talents we have there. We have a few hubs, technological hubs in Romania. Cluj is in the heart of Transylvania, is one of them. And basically, approximately 30% of the Romanian graduates are STEM people, so they are qualified in science, technical, engineering, and mathematics. So this is my vision. I would love to see this kind of joint ventures. And I'm sure that out of this collaboration, we will definitely benefit from quite new and good innovative products.
Eric?
Yeah, I think that it comes down to the difference between an authoritarian capitalist model versus a democratic capitalist model. And at the end of the day, what South Korean companies can offer is that partnership, right? That long-term wealth creation, where you're not just there for a one-off infrastructure project, but you're there to engage over decades and build wealth and build your company together. Versus a one-off project where we're going to cut corners, we're going to get the deal done, but at the end of the day, it's not going to add much at the margins. So that's, I think, what South Korea, the key advantage. Now, it's a longer process to engage in relationships like that, but it's more sustainable, and it offers a lot more wealth creation potential.
Yeah, like Alex said, Chinese companies are often just dropping projects, or they're not chosen in processes. My last but one question will be about obstacles. Do you see any obstacles right now that could kind of hinder this collaboration between Central and Eastern Europe and South Korea?
as long as we find this way to partner and to put together the local know-how and the capital and research and development coming from South Korea to Central Eastern Europe, I don't see any issues. Countries are open for business, governments are ready to support with all kind of governmental programs such new developments, either under a state aid scheme or particular agencies supporting the development process of such projects. No, honestly, I don't see any reason for.
Niall.
Yes, I was especially struck by the comments from the chief executive of the Korean Federation of Industry, and he held up the book *The Road to Serfdom* by F.A. Hayek, one of the greatest books, I think, of the modern era. And Hayek's message, of course, is that economic freedom, getting government off the backs of entrepreneurs, getting government off the backs of individual business people, of companies, corporations, etc. This is the best way to advance, prosperity. So economic freedom really does work. And so a South Korea that embraces fully the ideals and principles of economic freedom, and I do think the incoming South Korean administration has pledged to do that. That sends a very positive message to the world. And I think, the best way that South Korean businesses, entrepreneurs can succeed internationally, including in Europe, is if their own government gives them the freedom to operate in a low-tax environment, limited regulations, throwing out all the red tape, allowing South Korean companies to really unleash their full potential, based upon the ideals and principles of economic freedom. Because at the end of the day, economic liberty really does work. It's the path to prosperity on the international stage, and there's so much South Korean companies and businessmen and leaders can offer, actually, in Europe, if their own government gives them the opportunity to be able to reach their full potential. So I was very encouraged by the message this morning, and I thought that was a tremendously optimistic message that my former boss, Margaret Thatcher, would have loved every word of it, I think.
Alex, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I think one challenge may be distance. And the perception of distance. I was asked myself by my friends in Romania when I came here, you're going all the way to Korea to speak about some of these issues? And I said, yes. We are, as they say at NATO, stronger as allies. We have a common thinking about security challenges and global challenges today. We have a common approach, value-based, to how business, how capitalism, how innovation can be pursued during these challenging times. And the opportunity to rebuild or to support Ukraine post-war, but also to support the Central and Eastern European region to advance, is something that really puts us, only a few hours away, or by video call, or by email. So the distance is not that big.
Eric.
Alex stole my first one, so I had two: geography and inertia. Geography, the physical distance. Typically, your closest geographic neighbors are your traditional kind of largest trading partners, traditionally, but also inertia. So business. Once you start business in a specific area, you tend to kind of keep doing business in that area. And if there's not a carrot present, I think that it'll have a tough time starting. So what that carrot is, I don't exactly know, but I think that between the private sector and government, they can come up with an appropriate set of carrots to make sure that this type of relationship starts up.
Speaking about geography, I think there is a direct flight between Warsaw and Seoul, as far as I remember, with LOT Polish Airlines, at least this one. So the final question, if you were to use just one word to describe, I know you love these kind of questions. One word to describe the future relations between Central and Eastern Europe and Korea, what would that be? Just one word.
Just one word?
Just one word.
Opportunity.
Opportunity, okay.
Well, I would say it's freedom, isn't it? Because it's the principles of freedom that unite the South Korean people with those in Europe who are fighting to defend freedom. It's the same cause, the same principles, the same ideals that unite the South Korean people with our friends and partners in Europe.
There's slightly more words than just one. Alex?
Romania actually has a...
So it's Romania?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
No. I will get to it, but leading into this. We actually have an emerging baseball league because there are U.S. troops and NATO troops in Romania. So my one word would be play ball.
Partnership.
Partnership. Gentlemen, thank you very much for this discussion. We're going to continue with the closing remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. I have already highlighted the 10th anniversary of the K.E.Y Platform conference, global conference today. I really enjoyed the discussion and I very much hope you did too, and that it has given you some food for thought. I am sure that Money Today's coverage and research, as well as the experts' inputs, have helped you get a better understanding of how to respond to all the crises and identify and create new opportunities in this geopolitical environment that seems more complex than any other one in the past. But we are not finished yet. There is more to come in the afternoon. After lunch, you can join more sessions with experts sharing more specific analyses, outlooks, strategies, and solutions with you. In particular, I'd encourage you to join a session called Let's Help Korea Take the Lead in Tackling the Problems Facing the World. After lunch, you can participate in a special session focused on the future of science and technology, and yet another special session looking at demographics and discussing the aging society from a new perspective. Tomorrow, we will take a deeper dive into innovative startups, bioindustries, digital agriculture, and we will be joined by experts and officials from a wide range of companies and institutions. It was a real pleasure to spend this morning with all of you. I hope to be able to meet you and speak with you during breaks. Andrew Robel, thank you for having me.